Atlanta, Georgia. Would you risk your life for someone who never even looked at you like a hero? Jamal pressed his face against the bus window, watching the city pass by in a blur of color and noise. Today wasn't like any other day. Today was special. 13-year-old Jamal lived with his grandmother, Nana Ruth, in a small apartment on the outskirts of the city. Money was tight, and luxuries were rare. But Nana Ruth always made sure Jamal had love, wisdom, and warm meals. She worked tirelessly to keep their little home running, stretching every dollar as far as it could go. On special occasions, she saved up just enough to take him to the amusement park, their favorite place to escape reality. And today was one of those days. The excitement bubbled inside him as the bus rumbled toward their destination. When they arrived, Jamal's eyes widened at the sight of the bright lights, the towering roller coasters, and the colorful game booths lined up along the pathways. The smell of buttered popcorn and fried dough filled the air, and the sound of children laughing mixed with the cheerful carnival music. For a moment, the worries of everyday life faded away. Here, in this magical place, they weren't just trying to make ends meet. They were free. Nana Ruth held his hand as they walked through the entrance, her warm smile matching his excitement. "Where to first, baby?" she asked. "The Ferris wheel," Jamal said immediately. It had always been his favorite. From the very top, he could see the entire city spread out before him, glittering in the afternoon light. They waited in line, Jamal shifting from foot to foot with anticipation. When it was finally their turn, they climbed into the gondola, the ride operator securing the metal bar in front of them. Slowly, the wheel began to rise, lifting them higher and higher above the carnival grounds. Jamal grinned, taking in the breathtaking view. "It's amazing," he whispered. Nana Ruth chuckled. "See, sometimes when you're up high, all your problems seem small." Jamal glanced at her, seeing the wisdom behind her words. He knew their struggles weren't gone, but for now, up here, they didn't seem so heavy. The ride ended too soon, but the day was just beginning. They played carnival games, Nana Ruth cheering him on as he tried to knock over stacked bottles with a baseball. They shared a funnel cake, powdered sugar dusting their fingers. They watched performers juggle and do magic tricks, their laughter blending with the happy shouts around them. Jamal wanted to hold on to the moment forever. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm orange glow over the park, they made their way to the last ride of the night, the carousel. It was Nana Ruth's favorite. She chose a white horse with golden trim, while Jamal picked a sleek black stallion beside her. The music started, and the carousel began to spin. The world blurred into a swirl of lights and colors. Jamal closed his eyes, feeling the wind rush past him. He wanted to freeze this memory, tuck it away for the days when life felt too hard. When the ride slowed, Nana Ruth reached over and squeezed his hand. "I love you, Jamal." "I love you too, Nana," he said, his voice soft but full of meaning. They walked toward the exit, the magic of the carnival lingering around them. The real world awaited, but tonight they had this, and that was enough. But what happens when a simple carnival ride turns into a life-or-death situation? Where are you watching from, and what time is it? Jamal sat alone in the Ferris wheel gondola, enjoying the view of the city skyline as the ride climbed higher and higher. The twinkling lights stretched far into the distance, the sounds of laughter and carnival music drifting up from below. Up here, everything felt peaceful, weightless, as if the worries of the world couldn't reach him. In the seat in front of him was a blonde-haired girl around his age, laughing with excitement. Her voice was light, carefree, like she had never had a reason to worry. Dressed in expensive clothes, she looked like she came from a very different world than his. Jamal stole a glance at her. She hadn't noticed him, too caught up in the thrill of the ride. He wondered what it would be like to live like that, with no concerns beyond the next fun adventure. But before the thought could settle in his mind, a loud clank echoed through the metal structure. The Ferris wheel jerked violently, the entire ride shaking as if something had snapped. Jamal's hands gripped the sides of his seat instinctively, his stomach flipping as the gondola swayed. People below gasped, looking up in confusion. The girl in front of him lost her balance, slipping forward in her seat. Her laughter turned to a sharp gasp of panic. Jamal's eyes widened as he saw her fingers clawing at the safety bar, trying to keep herself from falling. Her seatbelt was loose. Jamal's heart pounded. His breath caught in his throat. She was in real danger, and no one else saw it. The ride operator was shouting something, but the words were lost in the noise. People below were too focused on the Ferris wheel stopping, unaware that a girl was barely holding on. "Hold on!" Jamal yelled, reaching forward. Her eyes met his wide with terror. Her hands were slipping. 1 second. That's all it would take. One slip, and she would be gone. The Ferris wheel creaked again, the entire structure groaning under pressure. The ride had stopped moving completely, leaving them suspended high above the carnival. More shouts erupted from below, people pointing, waving, trying to figure out what was happening. Jamal didn't have time to think. He had to act. The girl screamed, her feet slipping out as she dangled dangerously over the edge. The Ferris wheel was completely still, suspended high above the carnival, but her grip on the metal bar was weakening by the second. "Help! I'm falling!" she cried, her knuckles white as she struggled to hold on. Her legs kicked wildly, searching for any kind of support that wasn't there. Below them, the carnival continued. Music blared from the speakers, laughter echoed from the crowd, and the flashing lights of the rides flickered like nothing was wrong. But something was very wrong. No one realized what was happening high above. No one saw that a girl's life was hanging by a thread. Jamal had no time to think. His pulse pounded in his ears. He knew if she lost her grip, she wouldn't survive the fall. "Hold on! I got you!" he shouted, unbuckling his own seatbelt. She was slipping fast. Her fingers trembled as they fought against gravity. Terror filled her wide eyes as she gasped for breath. I can't hold on." Jamal had to act. He lunged forward, reaching for her, his own safety now at risk. His fingers brushed against hers, but she was too far away. He needed to move closer, but one wrong step and he could fall too. "You can do this," he called out, willing her to fight. "Just keep holding on." Down below, a few people had begun to notice something was wrong. Some pointed up, confused, their faces twisting in concern. But no one moved. No one knew what to do. Time was running out. Jamal gritted his teeth. There was only one option left. He climbed onto the edge of his seat, gripping the side tightly. He had to close the gap. He had to grab her before it was too late. The wind howled around them, rocking the gondola slightly. The metal groaned beneath their weight. Jamal's stomach twisted, but he forced himself to push forward. "Reach for me," he urged, stretching as far as he could. The girl whimpered, her fingers barely hanging on. She sucked in a sharp breath and made one final attempt. Their hands connected. Jamal clenched her wrist, gripping her as tightly as he could. He felt her weight shift, pulling against him. His muscles strained as he held on with everything he had. She was slipping. Jamal's other hand shot out, grabbing the side of the seat for leverage. He wouldn't let go. He couldn't. Below, a small group had gathered, gasping as they finally realized what was happening. The ride operator shouted into a radio, scrambling to get help. The crowd swelled, more phones raised to capture the terrifying moment. But Jamal wasn't thinking about them. He wasn't thinking about anything except keeping her safe. "Don't let go," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the wind. "I won't," he promised. But he wasn't sure how much longer he could hold on. What would you do in this moment? Would you risk everything to save a stranger? Let us know in the comments. A single decision can change everything. Share this story to inspire others about the power of courage and quick thinking. Jamal lunged forward, reaching out as far as he could. His fingers stretched toward the girl, his heart pounding against his ribs. Every muscle in his body screamed in protest, but he couldn't stop now. "Give me your hand," he shouted, stretching with all his strength. The girl, tears streaming down her face, hesitated for a split second. Fear held her back, paralyzing her as the world around them blurred into chaos. But she had no other choice. She let go of the metal bar and grabbed onto Jamal. Her weight nearly pulled him forward, his grip slipping for just a second. A gasp escaped his lips as he tightened his hold, locking his fingers around her wrist. She clung to him, her nails digging into his skin, panic in her eyes. Jamal gritted his teeth. His arms burned, his muscles trembling. He had never lifted anything heavier than grocery bags, and now he was holding someone's life in his hands. Below them, the carnival buzzed on. People were starting to gather, pointing, shouting, but no one could do anything. No one could help. It was just Jamal and the girl, high above the flashing lights and whirling rides. The Ferris wheel creaked again, shaking violently. His stomach lurched as the gondola tilted ever so slightly. They were running out of time. "Come on, you can do this," Jamal grunted, summoning every ounce of strength he had left. He pulled her up, inch by inch. His arms screamed in protest, sweat dripping down his forehead, but he refused to let go. The girl gasped, kicking her feet, trying to help herself up. Her legs dangled in the open air, her breath ragged with fear. Jamal let out a deep groan, shifting his weight back, using all his strength to pull her over the edge. For one terrifying moment, she slipped just a little, her body jerking downward, but he held tight. With one final pull, he dragged her back into her seat, securing her tightly. She collapsed, her entire body shaking, gripping the safety bar as if her life depended on it. Her chest rose and fell rapidly, her eyes wet with tears. Jamal could barely breathe, his own limbs trembling from exhaustion. The Ferris wheel groaned once more, shaking slightly as workers down below tried to fix whatever had gone wrong. The ride still wasn't moving, and they were still stranded high above the carnival. Jamal exhaled sharply, finally allowing himself a moment to process what had just happened. His hands were still shaking as he wiped sweat from his brow. He turned to the girl who was staring at him with wide, tear-filled eyes. "You saved me," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the noise below. Jamal swallowed hard. He didn't know what to say. He had just done what had to be done. She was safe. But the ride wasn't over yet. Would you have done the same? Sometimes, the biggest acts of bravery come in the scariest moments. Share this story if you believe in courage and quick thinking. The Ferris wheel finally began moving again, lowering them back to the ground. The mechanical groan of the ride echoed through the night, and the once paralyzed crowd below erupted into cheers. Carnival workers scrambled to ensure the gondolas descended safely, but Jamal barely noticed. His arms were sore, his breaths shallow, his mind still racing from what had just happened. The girl, still shaking, turned to Jamal, eyes filled with shock and gratitude. You saved me," she whispered, breathless. "Yeah," he said, rubbing his sore arms. "You okay?" She nodded, wiping her tears. "I didn't think I was gonna make it." "Well, you did," he said with a small smile. She stared at him, really looking at him for the first time. Before tonight, she probably wouldn't have given him a second glance. But now he was the reason she was still here. The Ferris wheel finally came to a complete stop. The safety bar lifted, and Jamal stepped out first, offering her a hand. She hesitated for a second before taking it, gripping tightly as she stepped onto solid ground. The second her feet touched the pavement, she exhaled sharply, her whole body trembling with relief. The crowd was waiting. Some people clapped, others murmured in confusion, asking each other what had happened. But Jamal could hear the ride operator's frantic voice calling into his radio, trying to explain the near tragedy that had just unfolded. When they reached the ground, the girl's parents ran toward her, frantic. The carnival lights flashed wildly around them, the energy of the crowd buzzing with confusion and relief. Jamal barely had time to step away before her mother pulled her into a tight hug. "Are you okay? What happened?" her mother cried, pressing her hands against the girl's face as if making sure she was still in one piece. The girl, still shaken but steady, pointed at Jamal. "This boy, he saved my life." Her father, who had been scanning the scene, finally turned, his eyes locking onto Jamal for the first time. His gaze flickered over Jamal's worn hoodie, his slightly scuffed sneakers, the uncertainty in his stance. At first, he looked skeptical, his brows furrowing as if trying to process it all. Then realization struck. The tension in his face melted, his shoulders dropping. He understood. He stepped toward Jamal. "You saved my daughter." Jamal nodded, shoving his hands into his pockets. "Yeah." For a moment, the father just stood there, his lips parting as if struggling to find the right words. Then, without hesitation, he reached out, gripping Jamal's hand in a firm shake. "Thank you." Jamal simply nodded. He wasn't sure what to say. He had only done what felt right. The girl wiped her eyes, still processing everything. She looked at Jamal again, really seeing him for the first time. He wasn't just a kid at the carnival anymore. He wasn't some stranger from the other side of town. He was the reason she was standing here, safe, in her parents' arms. Her mother turned to Jamal, emotion thick in her voice. "I don't even know how to thank you." Jamal shifted uncomfortably. He had never been the center of attention like this before. "You don't have to." But the father shook his head. "You saved her life. That means something." More people in the crowd were watching now. Some had caught bits of the story, others were whispering, trying to piece together what had happened. The ride operator was still speaking into his radio, his face pale from shock. The girl took a deep breath, stepping forward. Then, in front of everyone, she hugged Jamal. It wasn't just gratitude. It wasn't just relief. It was respect. Jamal hesitated, then patted her back awkwardly. When she pulled away, her expression had changed. He wasn't just the kid who had been on the ride with her. He was the kid who had risked everything for her. And that's when the girl did something nobody expected. Sometimes, the people we least expect become the ones we owe everything to. Would you have done what Jamal did? Share this story, and let's talk about real-life heroes. Days later, Jamal was sitting on his apartment steps, kicking at the cracked pavement with the toe of his shoe. The world around him moved as usual. Cars honked in the distance, kids played down the block, and the scent of home-cooked meals drifted from open windows. But inside, he felt different. He hadn't expected his life to change after that night at the carnival. He had only done what felt right. A sleek black car pulled up in front of the building. Jamal frowned, watching as the back door opened. The girl stepped out, smiling. "Hey, Jamal." He blinked in surprise. "You remembered my name?" "Of course," she said. "My parents wanted to thank you properly. We want to invite you and your grandma to dinner. And there's something else." Jamal hesitated. No one had ever treated him like this before. People usually walked past him, barely noticing he was there. But now, someone had come looking for him. The girl's father stepped forward, dressed sharply, his expression sincere. He held an envelope in his hand. "This is for you, son. A full scholarship to one of the best schools in the city. And a new home where you and your grandmother won't have to struggle anymore." Jamal stared at the envelope, unsure what to say. Stop. It didn't seem real. People like him didn't get opportunities like this. He thought about Nana Ruth, about how hard she worked just to keep a roof over their heads. Then he thought about what she always said. Kindness has a way of coming back to you. His fingers grazed the envelope, but he didn't take it right away. "Why?" he asked, looking up at them. The girl's father smiled. "Because what you did wasn't just brave, it was selfless, and people like you deserve to be given a chance." Jamal swallowed hard. He thought of all the times he had wondered if the world even saw him, if anyone noticed the struggles he and Nana Ruth faced every day. Now, here he was, being handed something he never imagined possible. A future. He looked up, taking a deep breath. "Okay." Tears welled in the girl's mother's eyes. "We're so happy for you, Jamal." He gave a small nod, still processing everything. His heart pounded in his chest, not from fear, but from something new. Hope. As the sun set behind the buildings, casting a golden glow over the street, Jamal realized something important. He hadn't saved the girl that night for a reward. He had done it because it was the right thing to do. But in the end, doing the right thing had given him more than he could have ever imagined. Jamal had saved her life that day. But in the end, he gained something he never expected. A future, a home, and a chance to change his life forever. Would you have done what the Jamal did? Comment below and share this story if you believe in second chances.